Memory, Maya learned, was not a library with organized shelves and carefully cataloged experiences. It was more like a house during a tornado, everything flying around at once, landing in impossible places, with yesterday's breakfast dishes somehow ending up in next week's laundry basket. Rose Martinez sat in the sunroom of Willowbrook Memory Care, staring out the window at a garden that changed seasons without consulting her calendar. She was 78 years old and had been living with Alzheimer's for 3 years, though time had become more of a suggestion than a fact in her daily experience. Maya, her 16-year-old granddaughter, visited every day after school, bringing homework and hope in equal measure. "Grandma Rose," Maya said, settling into the chair beside her grandmother's wheelchair. "How are you feeling today?" Rose turned with the slow, careful movement of someone navigating a world that had stopped making reliable sense. Her eyes, still the same bright brown, Maya remembered from childhood stories and birthday cakes, took a moment to focus, then brightened with recognition. "Maya, sweetheart," Rose said, reaching for her granddaughter's hand with fingers that trembled slightly. "I've been waiting for you. I have something important to tell you." Maya squeezed her grandmother's hand gently. This was how most of their conversations started now, with Rose believing she had urgent news to share. Usually, the important information turned out to be a memory from decades past, or concern about events that had been resolved years ago, or questions about people who had died when Maya was still in elementary school. "What is it, Grandma?" Rose leaned forward conspiratorially, as if sharing state secrets. "Your graduation speech," she whispered. "It's going to be beautiful. You're going to talk about butterflies and mathematics, and how love is the only equation that gets more complex when you solve it." Maya blinked. She was a sophomore in high school, still 2 years away from graduation, and had never mentioned giving a speech to her grandmother. "Grandma, I haven't written any graduation speech." Rose's expression shifted to confusion, then frustration, then the careful blankness that meant her mind was shuffling through possibilities like a deck of cards that kept changing suits mid-game. "But you showed it to me," she insisted. "You were wearing that blue dress, the one with the tiny flowers, and you were so nervous your hands were shaking. You practiced it 3 times, and each time it got more beautiful." Maya didn't own a blue dress with tiny flowers. She'd never written a graduation speech, and she was reasonably certain her hands didn't shake when she was nervous. She bit her nails instead, a habit her mother had been trying to break since middle school. But something in her grandmother's tone made her pause. Rose wasn't speaking with the distant confusion of someone trying to remember something that had happened. She was speaking with the immediate certainty of someone describing something they'd recently witnessed. "Tell me more about the speech, Grandma." Rose's eyes sharpened with the kind of focus Maya rarely saw anymore. "You talked about how butterflies remember being caterpillars even after they become something completely different. You said that's what love does to people. It transforms them completely, but somehow they remember who they were before, and that memory makes them braver about who they're becoming." Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the sunroom's air conditioning. Those were her thoughts. Thoughts she'd had but never spoken aloud. Ideas she'd been working through in her private journal. Concepts she'd been exploring in the essays she wrote for English class but never shared with anyone. "What else did I say in the speech?" Rose closed her eyes, as if trying to pull the memory into clearer focus. "You thanked me. You said I taught you that mathematics isn't about finding the right answer, it's about asking the right questions. And you said that the most important question isn't, what's the solution, but who do you become while you're solving it?" Maya's hands went cold. She'd written those exact words in her journal the night before, in an essay about her grandmother's influence on her love of mathematics. She'd never shared those thoughts with anyone, including Rose. "Grandma," Maya said carefully, "when did you see me give this speech?" Rose opened her eyes and looked at Maya with an expression of gentle patience, as if explaining something obvious to someone who was being deliberately obtuse. "Tomorrow, sweetheart. I saw it tomorrow. Photographs that move like time." Dr. Sarah Chen had been Rose's neurologist for 2 years, and she'd seen enough cases of Alzheimer's to know that the disease affected everyone differently. Some patients lost recent memories first, living more clearly in the past than the present. Others lost language, or spatial awareness, or the ability to recognize familiar faces. but she'd never had a patient describe future events with the same clarity and detail that Rose used to describe memories that hadn't happened yet. It's not uncommon for Alzheimer's patients to experience confusion about time, Dr. Chen explained to Maya and her mother Carmen during their monthly family meeting. Past and present often blend together. Sometimes patients will talk about deceased relatives as if they're still alive, or describe childhood events as if they happened yesterday. But she's not describing the past, Maya insisted. She's describing things that haven't happened yet, and she gets details right, details she couldn't possibly know. Carmen placed a hand on Maya's shoulder with the gentle pressure of someone trying to keep a conversation from drifting into territory that would be too painful to explore. Sweetheart, Grandma Rose's mind is playing tricks on her. The disease affects memory in complicated ways. Mom, she described my graduation speech word for word. I wrote those exact words in my journal the day after she told me about them. How is that possible? Dr. Chen consulted Rose's chart, though Maya suspected she was buying time to think rather than looking for specific medical information. Maya, I want you to understand that your grandmother's brain is changing in ways that we don't fully understand. Sometimes those changes can create experiences that feel very real to the patient but don't correspond to actual events. What if they do correspond to actual events? Maya asked. What if she's remembering things that are going to happen instead of things that already happened? Dr. Chen's expression was kind but firm in the way that doctors learned when they needed to redirect families away from hope that would only make the loss more painful. That's not how memory works. That's not how the brain works. That's not how time works. Maya nodded politely, but she wasn't convinced. That afternoon, she sat with Rose in the sunroom and decided to conduct an experiment. Grandma, tell me about Christmas this year. Rose smiled with the anticipation of someone looking forward to a celebration that was still months away. Oh, it's going to be wonderful. Your cousin David is coming home from college with his new girlfriend, the one who studies marine biology and has that infectious laugh. Your mother is going to burn the turkey again, but your father will save it by making his famous sandwiches, and you're going to give me a present that makes me cry happy tears. Maya took notes in a composition book, writing down every detail Rose provided. David was her cousin, but he was studying engineering, not dating anyone as far as Maya knew, and he'd never mentioned having a girlfriend who studied marine biology. Her mother had never burned a turkey. Carmen was actually an excellent cook. Her father had been dead for 8 years, but Maya wrote it all down anyway, along with the date and time of the conversation, because something about Rose's certainty made her want to document it, just in case. What's the present I'm going to give you? Rose's eyes filled with tears that seemed to come from joy rather than sadness. A photo album, but not with old pictures, with new ones. Pictures of all the things we're going to do together after I get better. Maya's pen stopped moving. After you get better? Oh yes, sweetheart. I'm going to get much worse before I get better, but then I'm going to remember everything again. Not just the things that happened, but the things that are going to happen. And we're going to have such adventures. Dr. Chen had been very clear that Alzheimer's was a progressive disease, that Rose would continue to lose more memories, more abilities, more of herself until there was nothing left to lose. There was no getting better. There was no remembering everything again. There were no adventures waiting on the other side of forgetting. But Maya wrote it down anyway. The future Rose could see. Over the following weeks, Maya began keeping detailed records of Rose's future memories. She filled 3 composition books with descriptions of events that Rose claimed would happen. Maya's junior prom dress, silver with beading that looked like stars. Her acceptance letter to MIT, which arrived on a Tuesday in March during a snowstorm. Her first job interview at a coffee shop where she accidentally spilled espresso on the manager but got hired anyway because she made the woman laugh while cleaning it up. Some of Rose's predictions were specific enough to test. She said Maya would get an A- on her chemistry midterm because she'd forget to balance one equation, but would write such a thorough explanation of molecular bonding that Mr. Peterson would give her partial credit. She said Maya's best friend Jessica would break up with her boyfriend after he forgot her birthday, and that it would happen on a Thursday during lunch period in the cafeteria. Maya waited. She studied for chemistry, not mentioning Rose's prediction to anyone. She watched Jessica and her boyfriend Brad for signs of relationship trouble, though they seemed perfectly happy. The chemistry midterm came back with an A-. Maya had forgotten to balance one equation, but her explanation of molecular bonding had earned her enough partial credit to keep her grade high. Mr. Peterson had written, "Excellent analysis" in the margin. On a Thursday during lunch period, Jessica came to Maya's table crying because Brad had forgotten her birthday and then gotten defensive when she'd mentioned it. They'd broken up 15 minutes earlier, right next to the vending machines, exactly as Rose had described. Maya stared at her notebook, filled with Rose's impossible predictions, and realized she was documenting something that medical science insisted was impossible. Her grandmother wasn't just losing her past. She was somehow gaining access to the future. "Mom," Maya said that evening, finding Carmen in the kitchen making dinner and grading papers simultaneously, the multitasking ballet of a high school English teacher who was also a single parent. "I think there's something unusual happening with Grandma Rose's condition." Carmen looked up from a student essay about symbolism in The Great Gatsby. "Unusual how?" Maya sat down at the kitchen table with her notebooks. "She's predicting things, specific things, that are coming true." "Maya, sweetheart." "No, listen. She told me Jessica would break up with Brad on a Thursday during lunch. She told me I'd get an A- on my chemistry test for specific reasons. She described my test grade before I'd even taken the test, Mom. She knew things she couldn't possibly know." Carmen set down the student essay and looked at her daughter with the careful attention of someone trying to assess whether a situation required immediate intervention or gentle redirection. People make lucky guesses sometimes, especially about things like teenage relationships, which tend to follow predictable patterns. Maya opened her first notebook and began reading Rose's predictions aloud. The specificity was impossible to dismiss as lucky guessing. Rose had predicted that Maya would lose her favorite pen, the blue one with the grip that made her handwriting look neater, on a Wednesday between second and third period, and that she'd find it in the library 3 days later, tucked between pages 247 and 248 of a calculus textbook she'd never checked out. Maya had lost the pen exactly as Rose described. She'd found it exactly where Rose said it would be, in a calculus book she'd never seen before, tucked between pages that contained formulas she wouldn't learn until senior year. Carmen listened to Maya's recitation of predictions and outcomes with the growing expression of someone trying to solve a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit together according to any rules she understood. "Maybe she's making educated guesses based on things she notices about your behavior," Carmen said finally. "Grandma Rose was always very observant. Maybe her brain is picking up on patterns you're not conscious of. What about this one?" Maya turned to a page covered with Rose's description of a conversation Maya would have with Mr. Peterson about changing her schedule to take advanced placement calculus. Rose had predicted that Maya would decide to make the change on a Friday afternoon after school, that Mr. Peterson would initially say no because the class was full, but that he'd change his mind when Maya mentioned her interest in studying mathematics at MIT. Maya had never mentioned MIT to anyone. She'd been thinking about it, researching their mathematics program, but she hadn't told even Jessica about her college interests. "Maya," Carmen said gently, "you're looking for patterns that aren't there because you're trying to find a way to make sense of losing your grandmother. But what you're describing isn't medically possible. What if it is possible? What if there's something about Alzheimer's that we don't understand? What if losing memories creates space for something else?" Carmen closed her eyes and took the deep breath of someone who was about to say something that would sound harsh, but was motivated by love. "Maya, your grandmother is dying. Her brain is deteriorating, and she's going to continue losing more of herself until there's nothing left. Looking for magic or miracles or impossible explanations isn't going to change that. It's just going to make it harder to accept what's really happening." Maya stared at her notebooks, filled with 3 weeks of documented predictions and outcomes, and realized that whether her grandmother was somehow seeing the future or not, Carmen was right about one thing. Rose was dying. The question was whether Maya could figure out what was happening before it was too late to matter. What? The heart remembers. Maya started spending more time at Willowbrook, arriving immediately after school and staying until visiting hours ended. She brought her homework and did it in Rose's room, reading her assignments aloud when Rose was alert enough to listen, writing in her notebooks when Rose was sleeping or staring out the window at seasons that changed without her permission. The other residents noticed Maya's constant presence with the kind of attention that elderly people pay to young People who voluntarily spend time in places that smell like disinfectant and forgotten birthdays. Mrs. Patterson, who lived 3 doors down from Rose, started stopping by during her evening walk to comment on what a good granddaughter Maya was. Mr. Hendricks, who rarely spoke to anyone since his wife died, began nodding approval when he saw Maya reading to Rose. "You're lucky to have such a devoted family member," one of the nurses told Rose during medication time. "Most people your age don't get daily visits." Rose smiled with the serene confidence of someone who knew secrets that other people couldn't access. "Maya's not just visiting me," she said. "She's collecting memories." "That's sweet, Mrs. Martinez. I'm sure she enjoys hearing about your past." "Not my past," Rose corrected gently. "Our future." Maya looked up from her calculus homework, listening to her grandmother explain to the nurse that she was documenting tomorrow instead of yesterday. That memory worked both directions if you knew how to tune into the right frequency. That love was strong enough to reach backward from events that hadn't happened yet. The nurse smiled politely and made notes about Rose's increasing confusion. But Maya wrote down every word in her composition book, along with the date and time and her grandmother's exact facial expression when she said the word future. That evening, Maya stayed later than usual, reading aloud from her English assignment, while Rose drifted in and out of awareness. The book was 100 Years of Solitude, and Maya was reading about characters who experienced time in circular rather than linear patterns, who remembered things that hadn't happened yet and forgot things that had definitely occurred. "That's not fiction," Rose said suddenly, interrupting Maya's reading of a passage about prophecy and repetition. "That's just how memory really works, when you're not paying attention to clocks." Maya set down the book. "What do you mean, Grandma?" Rose turned to look at Maya with eyes that seemed more focused than they'd been in weeks. "Time doesn't move the way we think it does, sweetheart. It's more like water than like a train. It flows in all directions at once, and sometimes it pools up in places where love is deepest. Are you saying you can see the future? I'm saying I can remember love that hasn't happened yet. And love remembers everything, past, present, future. It doesn't matter to love whether something has already occurred or is still waiting to occur. Love just knows." Maya wrote this down, though she wasn't sure she understood what Rose meant. "How do you know which memories are real?" Rose reached for Maya's hand with fingers that were steady for the first time in months. "They're all real, sweetheart. The question isn't which memories are real. The question is which ones you're brave enough to believe." Dancing with tomorrow's ghost. The next day, Maya brought a different kind of experiment. Instead of just documenting Rose's predictions, she decided to test whether she could influence them. "Grandma Rose," she said, settling into her usual chair in the sunroom, "tell me about my 18th birthday." Rose smiled with the anticipation of someone planning a party. "Oh, it's going to be perfect. We're going to have it in the garden behind your mother's house with lights strung between the trees and music that makes everyone want to dance. Your cousin David will bring his marine biology girlfriend, and she'll tell us fascinating stories about octopus intelligence while we eat cake." Maya made notes, but she was more interested in testing the boundaries of Rose's visions than in documenting them. What if we had the party somewhere else? What if we had it at the beach? Rose's expression shifted to confusion, then to something that looked like she was trying to tune into a radio station that was coming in static. "The beach?" she repeated, sounding uncertain. I don't see the beach. I see the garden. I see lights and music and cake and David's girlfriend talking about octopuses. But what if we changed the plan? What if we decided to have it at the beach instead?" Rose was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the garden that existed in the present moment, then closing her eyes as if trying to see something that existed in a different temporal dimension. "You could change the plan," she said finally, "but you won't, because the party in the garden is the party where something important happens." "What happens?" Rose opened her eyes and looked at Maya with an expression of gentle sadness. "I give you something that I can only give you once, and you give me something that you can only give me once. And we both understand that it's the last time we'll be able to give each other gifts that we'll both remember." Maya felt her throat tighten. "What kind of gifts?" "I give you the last clear memory I'll have of your face. You give me the first clear memory you'll have of letting me go." Maya stopped writing. The composition book sat open on her lap, but she couldn't make herself document this particular prediction because it felt too much like prophecy, and not enough like the benign future memories she'd been collecting. "Grandma, I'm not ready to let you go." "I know, sweetheart. That's why it has to be a gift. If you were ready, it wouldn't be brave." Maya set down her pen and moved her chair closer to Rose's wheelchair. Close, enough to take her grandmother's hands in both of hers. "What if I don't want to be brave? What if I want to be selfish and keep you here with me as long as possible?" Rose squeezed Maya's hands with surprising strength. "Then you keep me as long as love can hold on. But when love starts hurting more than it helps, you let me dance with tomorrow's ghost." "What does that mean?" "It means you trust that some kinds of love are strong enough to exist without the people who created them. It means you believe that I can love you from inside your memories even after I can't remember how to love you from inside my own mind." Maya wanted to argue, to insist that Rose would get better despite what the doctors said, to believe that the future memories Rose was accessing included a timeline where Alzheimer's was a temporary condition, rather than a permanent goodbye. But something in Rose's tone made her realize that even Rose's impossible visions of the future didn't include a version of events, where she recovered her memories and lived long enough to see Maya graduate from college, get married, have children of her own. "How much time do we have?" Maya asked. Rose closed her eyes again, tuning into whatever frequency allowed her to remember love that hadn't happened yet. "Until Christmas," she said. "We have until Christmas." The Memory Keeper's journal, Maya developed a new routine. Every day after school, she went to Willowbrook and spent 3 hours with Rose. The first hour was for EO, documenting Rose's future memories, the predictions, visions, and impossible recollections that seemed to be replacing Rose's ability to remember the past. The second hour was for reading aloud, usually from books that Rose had loved when her mind was more reliable. The third hour was for what Maya called memory keeping, recording Rose's stories about Maya's childhood, her parents, her grandparents, the family history that would be lost when Rose's mind finally stopped being able to reach. Backward into yesterday, the composition books multiplied. Maya filled one notebook with Rose's predictions about Maya's immediate future: test grades, social dynamics, college applications, summer jobs. She filled another with Rose's descriptions of Maya's long-term future: graduation, college, career, relationships, the family Maya would someday create. A third notebook became the repository for Rose's memories of the past, stories about Maya's father before he died, about Carmen as a young mother, about Rose's own childhood in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business and most people preferred it that way. The pattern that emerged surprised Maya. Rose's memories of the past were becoming vaguer and less detailed, fading like photographs left in sunlight, but her visions of the future were becoming clearer and more specific, as if the space in her mind that was no longer occupied by yesterday was being filled with elaborate, detailed recollections of tomorrow. "It's like she's trading past for future," Maya told Jessica during lunch, showing her friend the notebooks filled with Rose's impossible predictions. "She can't remember what she ate for breakfast, but she can describe my wedding dress in detail." Jessica flipped through pages of Rose's descriptions. Maya's college roommate, a pre-med student from Oregon who played guitar and made exceptional chocolate chip cookies. Maya's first apartment after graduation, a studio with brick walls and windows that faced east so the morning light would wake her up naturally. Maya's first serious boyfriend, a mathematics graduate student with kind eyes and a laugh that sounded like music. "This is crazy specific," Jessica said. "How does she know you're going to study mathematics? You haven't even declared a major preference." "That's what's weird about it. She knows things about my future that I haven't decided yet, like she's remembering decisions I'm going to make before I've made them." "What if she's influencing your decisions by predicting them? Like, what if you study mathematics because she said you would, not because she somehow knew you would?" Maya had considered this possibility, but it didn't explain the predictions that had nothing to do with her choices. Rose had described the weather on specific days months in advance. She'd predicted the outcome of her cousin David's college football games before the season had started. She'd known that Mrs. Patterson would fall and break her hip 3 days before it happened, and had asked the nurses to pay special attention to her balance during evening walks. "Some of her predictions are about things I can't control," Maya said. "She told me it would snow on Halloween, 6 inches, enough to cancel trick-or-treating in most neighborhoods. She said the snow would stop exactly at midnight and the next day would be so clear you could see stars in the middle of the afternoon. Jessica looked skeptical, which Maya understood. The whole situation sounded impossible even to Maya, who was living it and documenting it daily. "What are you going to do with all this?" Jessica asked, gesturing to the notebooks. Maya had been wondering the same thing. The documentation felt important, but she wasn't sure why or for whom. "I think I'm creating a record," she said, "in case someone else needs to understand what happened. In case this isn't just about Grandma Rose, but about something larger." "Like what?" "Like maybe love really is strong enough to reach backward from the future. Maybe people who are dying don't just lose access to the past. Maybe they gain access to something else. Maybe there's more to memory and time than we understand." Jessica was quiet for a moment, processing the implications of what Maya was suggesting. "If that's true," she said finally, "then what you're documenting isn't just about your grandmother. It's about the possibility that love transcends time." Maya nodded. That's exactly what she thought she was documenting, though she wasn't sure she was brave enough to say it aloud until Jessica said it first. When yesterday meets tomorrow, Dr. Chen requested a meeting with Maya and Carmen in early December, 3 months after Maya had started documenting Rose's future memories. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon in Dr. Chen's office, which smelled like hand sanitizer and careful compassion. "Rose's condition has progressed significantly," Dr. Chen began, consulting a EA file thick with test results and observation notes. "She's losing more cognitive function each week. Her short-term memory is almost completely gone, and her long-term memory is fragmented and unreliable." Maya wanted to argue that Rose's long-term memory wasn't unreliable. It was just oriented toward tomorrow instead of yesterday. But she'd learned that doctors responded better to questions than to challenges. "How much time does she have?" Maya asked. Dr. Chen's expression was gentle but direct. "It's difficult to predict precisely, but based on the rate of decline, I'd estimate weeks rather than months." Carmen reached for Maya's hand, a gesture of support that acknowledged they were both losing someone essential to their understanding of family. "Is she in pain?" Carmen asked. "Physical pain?" "No. The disease itself isn't painful, but she's experiencing significant confusion and disorientation, which can be distressing." Maya thought about her daily conversations with Rose, who seemed less confused about the future than she was about the present. What if the confusion isn't random? What if her brain is accessing information in a different way than we expect? Dr. Chen smiled, with the patience of someone who had learned to redirect families away from hope that would only intensify grief. "Maya, I understand that you're looking for patterns that might suggest your grandmother's condition is somehow different from typical Alzheimer's progression. But what you're describing, the future memories, the predictions, these are manifestations of temporal disorientation, not glimpses of actual future events." Maya opened one of her composition books and showed Dr. Chen pages of documented predictions and outcomes. "She described my chemistry test results before I took the test. She knew about my friend's breakup 3 days before it happened. She predicted a snowstorm that the weather service didn't forecast until the day it occurred." Dr. Chen reviewed Maya's documentation with the careful attention of someone who had learned to look for patterns in seemingly random symptoms. "Maya, this is impressive record-keeping. But correlation doesn't imply causation. Your grandmother might be making educated guesses based on behavioral patterns she's observing subconsciously." "What about this?" Maya turned to a page where Rose had described Maya's acceptance letter to MIT. The specific wording, the date it would arrive, even the fact that Maya would be wearing her blue sweater when she opened it. "I haven't even applied to MIT yet. The application isn't due for 2 months." Carmen looked at Maya with surprise. "You're planning to apply to MIT? You never mentioned that." "Because I only decided yesterday. But Grandma Rose described my acceptance letter 6 weeks ago." Dr. Chen closed the notebook and looked at Maya and Carmen with the expression of someone preparing to deliver news that would be difficult to accept. "I want to order additional tests for Rose. What you're describing could be indicative of a rare form of dementia that affects temporal processing in unusual ways." Maya felt a flicker of hope. "You mean there might be a medical explanation for what she's experiencing?" "I mean, there might be a medical explanation for why she's experiencing temporal disorientation in this particular pattern. But Maya," Dr. Chen's voice was gentle but firm, "even if we identify a rare condition, It doesn't change the prognosis. It doesn't change the fact that Rose is dying. Maya nodded, though she wasn't ready to accept that Rose's impossible memories were just another symptom of a disease that was taking her grandmother away. Can we do the tests? Of course. I'll schedule them for next week. The last dance before forgetting. The additional tests revealed something unexpected. Rose's brain showed activity patterns that didn't match typical Alzheimer's progression, while areas associated with short-term memory and recognition were severely deteriorated. Regions associated with creative thinking and temporal processing were more active than normal, hyperactive in fact, as if Rose's brain was working overtime to process time itself. It's unprecedented, Dr. Chen admitted during the follow-up meeting. I've never seen activity patterns like this in any dementia patient. It's as if her brain is compensating for memory loss by developing enhanced temporal perception. Maya leaned forward in her chair. What does that mean? Exactly. Honestly, I'm not sure. I've consulted with colleagues at the university and no one has seen anything comparable. It's possible that your grandmother's brain is creating elaborate compensatory mechanisms that manifest as detailed projections of potential futures. But the projections are accurate, Maya insisted. She's not making random guesses. She's accessing actual information about events that haven't happened yet. Dr. Chen was quiet for a long moment, studying Rose's test. Results with the expression of someone trying to solve a puzzle that violated the rules of the game. Maya, I'm a scientist. I base my understanding on evidence and established medical principles. What you're documenting challenges everything I understand about neurology and temporal perception. But you can't explain it with conventional understanding? No, I can't. Maya felt something shift in her chest. Not quite vindication, but the relief of having her observations acknowledged as genuinely inexplicable rather than dismissed as wishful thinking. What do we do now? Carmen asked. Dr. Chen consulted Rose's file one more time, then closed it with the decisive gesture of someone who had made a difficult decision. We make Rose as comfortable as possible. We support her in the ways she needs support, and we document what's happening, because even if we can't explain it, it might be important for future research. Maya spent that evening with Rose in the sunroom, reading from her notebooks instead of from books. She read Rose's own words back to her, predictions about Maya's future, descriptions of events that hadn't happened yet, explanations of how love could remember forward as well as backward. Do you remember saying these things? Maya asked. Rose listened with the focused attention of someone hearing a fascinating story about strangers. I don't remember saying them, she said, but I remember knowing them. They feel true, even though I can't recall thinking them. Maya turned to a page near the back of her notebook, where she'd written Rose's description of their final conversation. According to Rose's prediction, it would happen on Christmas morning, in Rose's room at Willowbrook, with snow falling outside the window. Maya would give Rose the photo album filled with pictures of their imagined future adventures. Rose would give Maya permission to remember their love, without carrying the burden of her loss. Grandma Rose, Maya said, you told me we'd have until Christmas. Is that still true? Rose looked out the window at a garden entering winter dormancy. Time isn't as reliable as we pretend it is, she said. But love is more reliable than we dare to believe. We have as much time as love can hold, and then we have whatever comes after time. Maya wrote this down, though she wasn't sure she understood what Rose meant. She was beginning to suspect that understanding might be less important than witnessing. A love that outlasts memory. Christmas morning arrived with the snow that Rose had predicted 6 weeks earlier. Soft, steady flakes that turned the world outside Willowbrook into a quiet white postcard. Maya arrived early, carrying the photo album she'd spent weeks creating. It wasn't filled with memories of the past or documentation of the present. Instead, Maya had created a visual story of the future adventures she and Rose would never share. Photographs manipulated to show them traveling to places Rose had always wanted to visit, pictures edited to include both of them at Maya's graduation, her wedding, the birth of children Rose would never meet. The images were impossible, created through digital manipulation and wishful thinking, but they looked real. And they told the story of a relationship that would continue beyond the boundaries of Rose's failing memory. Maya found Rose sitting by her window, looking more alert than she'd been in weeks. It was as if the approaching end of her story had brought temporary clarity, the way a candle sometimes burns brightest just before it goes out. "Merry Christmas, Grandma." Rose turned with a smile that was completely present, completely aware. "Maya, sweetheart, you brought the album." Maya settled beside her grandmother's wheelchair and opened the photo album to the first page. "These are pictures of all the adventures we're going to have together." Rose examined each image with the careful attention of someone studying documentation of actual events. "This is beautiful work," she said. "You've captured our future perfectly." Maya turned pages slowly, narrating each impossible photograph. Rose traveling to Ireland to research their family genealogy. Rose and Maya hiking in the mountains near Maya's college campus. Rose holding Maya's first published mathematics paper, smiling with pride at her granddaughter's achievement. "These feel like memories," Rose said, "even though I know they haven't happened yet." Maya reached the final page of the album, which contained a photograph she'd created that morning. An image of Rose and Maya sitting together in this very room, with Maya holding the photo album, and Rose looking at her with eyes full of love and recognition. "This is happening right now," Maya said. "This is the memory we're creating together." Rose reached for Maya's hand with fingers that were steady despite the trembling that had affected her for months. "Maya, I need to tell you something important, and I need to tell you while I can. Still remember how to put words together in the right order." Maya set down the photo album and gave Rose her complete attention. "I'm going to forget you," Rose said, her voice clear and certain. "I'm going to forget your name and your face and all the beautiful conversations we've had. My mind is going to let go of everything that makes you you, everything that makes me me." Maya felt tears start, but Rose continued with the gentle insistence of someone delivering essential information. "But love doesn't live in memory, sweetheart. Love lives in the space between moments, in the connection that exists before thought and after forgetting. I'm going to lose my ability to remember loving you, but I'm never going to lose my love for you. Those are different things." Maya squeezed Rose's hand, understanding flooding through her like sunlight through a window that had just been opened. "The future memories I've been having, they're not predictions," Rose continued. "They're promises. They're love's way of guaranteeing that our relationship will continue even after my brain stops being able to sustain it. Love is writing the story of us that will exist after I can't remember how to read." Maya understood now why she'd been compelled to document Rose's impossible memories. She hadn't been recording predictions or medical anomalies. She'd been witnessing love's refusal to be bounded by the limitations of memory or time. "What happens now?" Maya asked. Rose smiled with the serenity of someone who had successfully completed an important mission. "Now you live the beautiful life that love has already remembered for you. You study mathematics at MIT. You meet the young man with kind eyes and a laugh like music. You have children who will never meet me but who will inherit the love that created these memories." Maya looked at her photo album, filled with impossible images of a future she and Rose would share in some dimension, beyond the reach of Alzheimer's or death, or the cruel limitations of linear time. "Will you remember this conversation?" Maya asked. Rose closed her eyes, as if checking her connection to the temporal frequencies that had allowed her to remember forward for the past few months. "I'll remember it in the place where love keeps all the important conversations," she said. "And someday, when you're old, and your own memory starts to fade, you'll access that same place, and you'll remember things that haven't happened yet, and you'll understand that time is much less reliable than love, and much less important." Maya spent the rest of Christmas morning reading from her notebooks, sharing Rose's own words with her, creating one final loop where the future remembered the past, and the past blessed the future. By evening, Rose had drifted into sleep. By the next morning, she no longer recognized Maya's voice. By New Year's Day, she had stopped speaking entirely. Rose died on a Tuesday in January during a snowstorm that arrived, exactly as she had predicted 3 months earlier. Maya was holding her hand, reading aloud from the notebook filled with Rose's descriptions of Maya's beautiful, impossible future. 6 months later, Maya received her acceptance letter to MIT on a Tuesday in March during a snowstorm, while wearing her blue sweater, exactly as Rose had remembered it would happen. The letter used the exact wording Rose had described, offered the scholarship amount Rose had predicted, and arrived on a day when Maya needed hope more than she needed explanations. Maya kept all the notebooks, filling them with additional pages as Rose's predictions continued to come true with startling accuracy. Her college roommate was indeed a pre-med student from Oregon, who played guitar and made exceptional chocolate chip cookies. Her first apartment had brick walls and east-facing windows that woke her with natural light. Her graduate advisor had kind eyes and a laugh that sounded like music. As the years passed, Maya began to understand that Rose's gift hadn't been the ability to see the future. It had been the ability to love forward, to reach across time with such intensity that memory itself bent to accommodate the force of that affection. Maya kept the photo album too, filled with impossible images of adventures she and Rose had never shared, but somehow had experienced together in the space where love writes stories that transcend the limitations of linear time. And sometimes, late at night when Maya was working on complex mathematical proofs, she felt Rose's presence in the room, not as memory or grief or wishful thinking, but as the continuing reality of love that had learned to exist independently of the minds that created it. In those moments, Maya understood what Rose had meant about love being more reliable than time. Rose was gone, but their relationship continued, sustained by promises that had been made in a future that love had remembered before either of them knew they would need those promises to become true. Maya graduated valedictorian, gave a speech about butterflies and mathematics and how love is the only equation that gets more complex when you solve it, and thanked her grandmother Rose for teaching her that the most important mathematical principle isn't finding the right answer, but becoming the right person while you're solving the problem. Rose wasn't there to hear the speech, but Maya knew she was listening from the place where love keeps all the important conversations, where memory reaches both backward and forward, where time is just another variable in the equation of connection that binds people across dimensions of experience that science hasn't learned to measure yet. The photo album sits on Maya's desk now, filled with impossible images that document the true story of a love that refused to be limited by the boundaries of memory or mortality. And sometimes when Maya is working late on research that pushes the boundaries of what mathematics can explain about time and consciousness and the mysterious ways that love transcends the physical limitations of brains and bodies, she opens the album and remembers forward, accessing the same temporal frequencies that allowed Rose to love her from the future, before she learned how to love her from the past.